Welcome to Harry's Hook. I am a journalist, big fan of boxing. I've written published articles on it. I also train and spar. Similar to Spence versus Crawford, Benavidez versus Andrade on paper was supposed to be a competitive, perhaps even a 50-50 fight. But like Spence versus Crawford, ultimately what we got was a beatdown. And in this case, a bold statement 2-1 Canelo Alvarez. Andrade and his corner threw in the towel after 6 rounds. This channel right here predicted a late Benavidez stoppage, but the fight was a bit more one-sided than even I expected. In today's video, I'm going to analyze Benavidez versus Andrade and really dive into what we learned or could take away from the fight about David Benavidez, El Bandera Roja, the Mexican monster, especially now that he's lined up for a potential shot at King Canelo. But first, if you enjoy this content, do me a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. I appreciate your support. Like my video on what we learned about Canelo from his last fight, I want to start with the defense. Now, I wasn't ready to say this before, primarily because of some issues I had with his resume, but I think now we can declare with some gusto that David Benavidez has an underrated defense, and the CompuBox data bears this out. He's right near the top in all of boxing in terms of his plus-minus numbers, and he's number 4, just behind Andrade, when it comes to having the lowest opponent power punch connect rate. In their 6-round fight, Andrade only landed about 26% of his punches. Benavidez was at about 35%. Sure, the monster's defense isn't pretty, but he was able to use that high guard to pick off most of the shots in Andrade's flurries and ultimately limit the damage. Here's an example of Benavidez showing good defensive instincts. After missing, he covers up. Then after Andrade rolled and gained the advantageous angle, Benavidez timed and ducked under the incoming right. Andrade was a game opponent. Even after the tide had turned and he was hurt, Andrade fought back and showed some pride before he ultimately called it quits, so his heart did have its limits. He started fast, as I and many other analysts predicted, outboxing Benavidez for the first couple rounds. There were even times in the fight when he would muscle him against the ropes and get physical with the bigger man. So another thing we learned is that a stronger and more durable fighter could potentially push Benavidez back and exert some control over stretches of the fight. I think this partially has to do with Benavidez's loose footwork and lack of a solid base, but I also suspect that he kinda lets this happen because he's an offensive opportunist. I don't think he really minds having his back to the ropes, because either way, he wants to be on the inside where his fast hands, unorthodox angles, and high work rate can outland his adversary. Benavidez also showed us some solid countering ability. In this instance, he covered up and blunted the blows from Andrade, then timed him, parrying and slipping the southpaw jab while landing his own straight right. In my pre-fight video, I talked about Andrade's winging rear hook, but it was Benavidez who dropped low for a level change and then utilized that winging hook to score a knockdown in the 4th. And he deployed that weapon several more times. In fact, the unorthodox angles on many of Benavidez's shots are an unpredictable facet of his offense that makes fight preparations for his opponents even more tricky. This also touches on the smart punch selection and tactical growth that we're seeing from the monster. In this moment, Andrade knows he's been hurt by the right hook multiple times, so he's really covering up, doing what he can to take the right hand away from Benavidez, while raising his shoulder on the opposite side to deflect any incoming left hook. So Benavidez first feints the right to elicit a reaction, then fires an arcing left hook over Andrade's shoulder. One more example of punch selection and tactics. Here, Benavidez dips his head and flares his shoulder as if he's going to fire another winging right hook. Andrade is prepared to block it, but instead Benavidez throws an overhand straight down the middle. It reminded me of Canelo's round 7 knockdown against Jermell Charlo, who had been feeling and blocking many of Canelo's right hooks around the guard. He was ready here for it again, but instead, Canelo threw a looping right straight down the pike. It's not just the size, the underrated defense, the constant pressure, the avalanche of punches, the inside work, but the angles, both on his combos and positioning, that make Benavidez such a problem. His last 2 wins against Caleb Plant and now Demetrius Andrade are by far his best. And what I just saw from the 26-year-old tells me that he is getting better, refining his skills, gaining more experience, and more confidence. So if Canelo is going to attempt to slay the monster, it would be wise to act now, before it's too late. And that right there is Harry's hook. Let me know what you think in the comments. What was most impressive to you about Benavidez's performance? How do you think that a matchup against Canelo goes? And if that fight gets announced, I will make a preview and prediction.